Morning, everybody. This morning about um, your health and why we're getting sick and what's really causing all of it. Although I forgot to change something. And so I'm going to fix that right now. So hold on. Sorry about that. I don't like to do that, but I forgot to change this over on YouTube and so I can track which video is I'm responding to. All right, guys, we're going to talk about this whole thing about why we're getting sick, why insulin resistance is related to probably 93% of us, and how we can start to get better if everything in our system is wrong. Well, first of all, understand that insulin resistance is caused by us eating too much and eating too much of the wrong foods. So it's not just one or the other, it's kind of both. Because even people who are eating less but are getting in the wrong foods are still getting sick, and there is a link to insulin resistance, definitely. But those people who are being told to eat every 2 hours, to count calories, and instead of having calories that are coming from proteins and fats, they're having calories that are coming from carbohydrates. Now we're getting sick. But let's dive in and look at the food and drug industries and what's making us be sick and why I'm saying we're being poisoned. That wasn't my term, by the way. There's a gentleman called Callie Means who used to work for Big Food, and he's spilling the beans on what's going on behind our food industry choices and how we're being coerced into eating these foods that are making us sick. So let's take a look at insulin resistance super quick, and then I want to go back into this whole food thing. So insulin resistance, we have too much blood sugar. We have it too often, and that increases our insulin. Our insulin is there to carry that blood sugar or energy to every cell in our body. When insulin is high for too long, it becomes something called hyperinsulinemia. But when it becomes too long, then it starts to become insulin resistance. And what that term really means is that the cells are not functioning in response to insulin in the way that they should. Now, some cells remain the same. Some cells are taking up too much insulin and it's causing problems. I've talked about those places. We can talk about it again today. But most cells are having this dysfunction where they're just shutting down and they're not allowing insulin to deliver energy to the cells anymore. So now we have this breakdown of systems going on, from chemicals that our kidneys need to put out, to the way our liver functions, to the way our gut is functioning, to the way our heart functions, our brain functions, our lungs function. All of it is tied into this insulin piece. So if we understand that too much sugar is creating this problem, and then some people will say, oh, do keto. But here's the problem for me with some of this stuff. And I'm not perfect. I want everybody to know I'm not perfect. I make my own mistakes. I have my own problems. I have my own tendencies that I've got to overcome too. So I'm not perfect. Not here to judge anybody, but I just want you guys to understand what's really happening. So a lot of people who are doing keto or who are doing veganism are buying these foods that are highly processed to fit that diet. But those highly processed foods are still part of the problem. Um, and it's interesting to me, as much as I talk about seed oils and how much damage and inflammation they're causing to the system through this high linoleic acids that they have that's causing insulin resistance to get worse. Callie actually called it industrial waste. So those seed oils that are sitting on the shelf that you're being marketed to as something that's healthy for you is actually by people who know, kind of sideline, called industrial waste, because that's what it is. And yet you're being told to put it in your body, and we're wondering why you have joint pain, why you have inflammation, why you have gut disturbances, why you have brain fog. All of that comes from this toxic waste that we're putting in our system. So how did we get here? If we know that sugar is a problem, if we know that all this food is an issue, good morning, Melba, and good morning to everybody who's jumping in here. Well, and I've talked about how our packaged and boxed foods are so incomplete, and they're just changed. Would you guys be interested to know that there was a research study put out by some of the people who give us our food recommendations, and what they came up with is this: that Cocoa Puffs, chocolate puffed cereal, is a better recommendation for you than eggs or beef or butter. What? Now, how does that happen? We have to start taking a look at the bigger part of the industry and subsidies and lobbyists and all the stuff that I don't normally get into. But the hard truth is, some of the biggest lobbyists, some of the biggest money spent out there to get politicians' attention, to get their product pushed through at whatever cost, is big pharma is number one, big food is number two, and they rank in spending way above even oil. So when we have these two industries that are are lobbying to be subsidized, and then on the other side, what you're getting is an imperfect picture and an imperfect story because somebody paid enough dollars to get their food in front of you. One of the most interesting things I learned, and I heard this months ago, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit this morning, is that they racialize this whole food debate. And what do I mean by that? Well, these lobbyists and these companies understand that if they throw race in, that they're more likely to get leverage in. So in specific, Callie was talking about Coke. And so this is a high sugar drink, and many people are calling it diabetes water. So especially the full sugar Coke, like um, I have a family member who gives one of the young children regular Coke, and it drives me insane because I'm like, haven't you heard me talk about this? Like, if you want to give him something, give him the no sugar alternative. At least do that, right? But no, it's the full sugar Coke. So, how did full sugar Coke, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Sprite, all of this get to be such a food staple? Well, when we look at food subsidy programs like SNAP, they were meant to give us nutrition, and yet these lobbyists have pushed it through so that some of these foods that are absolutely not nutritious, absolutely, in my opinion, killing our children, they have gone in with the race debate and said, hey, look, we know this specific group loves this product, and guess what, these guys are trying to take this away from you through the SNAP program. They're trying to say this is unhealthy and you shouldn't have it. So we need help making sure that this food, Coca-Cola, stays on this recommended list for nutrition that SNAP is paying for. And the problem here is, yeah, so they're taking underserved people and they're saying this is the perfect opportunity. They may not be able to afford all the food, and they may not be able to afford all the medication that comes along with getting sick, but we get subsidies. And so we have programs for healthcare. So the food system through SNAP and some of these other programs are allowing foods that are highly toxic to us to be bought with these dollars that are supposed to be giving these families nutrition, and they get sick. Then they go from getting this food that's making them sick to being passed off to having medication to help them get better, and they're still not paying for that. Tax dollars are paying for that too. So what they've done is they've taken underserved population, and instead of saying, well, look, I know it's tough, but let's make sure you have nutritious food. Let's make sure you have ways to get exercise. Let's make sure you have proper access to mental health care. All of that, instead of the money being spent there, the money's being spent on shoving Cocoa Puffs and Coca-Cola down your face, and you wonder why we're sick. So young parents are doing the best they can, right? I remember letting my kids have cereal for breakfast. I did all the wrong things too. But when we give our kids cereal for breakfast, we're basically giving them sugar in a bowl of milk. And how is anybody supposed to survive, thrive, and be healthy on a bowl of milk filled with sugar? And that's how most of our kids and some of us adults are starting our day. As we get to be adults, maybe it's a bagel and cream cheese, maybe it's some oatmeal, maybe it's a pancake or waffles or whatever. It still is starting the day out with high amounts of sugar that are causing us to be sick And the food industry is making sure that you're being sold this ideal that this food is what you need, and yet it's the very reason why you have all of this stuff going on. So it's not just about the fact that our foods have been packaged and modified and manufactured, and that we don't rotate our crops and all of this stuff, right? It actually comes down to food lobbyists, because why aren't we lobbying for more people to eat just grass-fed beef? If we just ate real nutritious food, we would have less footprint on the world for the food that we need. Part of the reason our footprint is so huge in food is because we're being given food that's devoid of nutrients and giving us the wrong things, in effect, giving us poison. So when I talk about it's poisoning us, right? Melba says it's easier to poison us than help teach us to eat right. And that's absolutely true. And but it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. So these doctors, when they go to school, they even and I heard it was a doctor and Callie Means talking that in this particular podcast that I was listening to, but they were talking about, doctors don't go into healthcare to pass off drugs to you. They go into healthcare to help you get better. And yet what they're being taught is, again, the textbooks and the information that they're being given are driven by those two industries, big food and big pharma. That's what they're being taught, and that's what they're being told is the right thing to do. Then they get into practice and they come out and they try to help people. And what they're doing is, instead of educating them on the stuff that I talk about every morning, they're giving them pills. But let's stop for a second, because I don't want to make doctors out to be the bad guy, right? They're doing the best they can. And you know what? There's a real fear for some of them that if they speak up, they're going to lose their license, and then they're not going to be able to help anybody. And there's this whole other story around that. So this is not about bastardizing doctors, because that's absolutely not my point. But they're being educated in a way that these industries want them to be educated, so that these industries can continue to thrive and grow off of your being ill and being sick. So, and you know what though? The nutritionist. So, and I would agree with high level nutritionists, and you have to be careful there too. So isn't this interesting? Because most nutritionists, like I had a nutritionist hang up on me in the beginning of my journey because, well, I'll tell that story in a minute. But this nutritionist hung up on me because everything that they were about to tell me to do was what I did that got me sick. And everything that they would tell me not to do is what I did to get better. And I was not trying to be argumentative. I was honestly at that point, like, I didn't have all the knowledge I have now. And I was like, look, if I'm doing something wrong, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know what it is that I should be doing. I want to be able to understand what gaps am I missing to this so that I can get better. But they were just frustrated that I found this protocol that did all of this stuff, and that most of the recommendations that I was following were not what they would follow, and I got hung up on. So you have to, whether it's a physician or a nutritionist, you have to be careful. But then the other part of that is, if doctors are reading books and studying books and testing out of books that are written by big pharma and big food, do you think that's not happening with your nutritionist as well? Who do you think writes the books that go into the studies that folks in nutrition school are learning? Now, my daughter is studying to be a nutritionist now because she's on this journey and she has a mind very much like mine. She's younger, so she wants to do it. And she's recognizing some of that. So she's recognizing, as she goes through these books, as she's going through her studies and her courses, that she has to do some critical thinking of her own and a little bit of study on her own to make sure that what she's learning is actually what's healthy for the clients that she wants to help. So it's just a problem. As a doctor of nutrition and a functional medicine, I have educated doctors. Kimberly, I'm not meaning to bash on anyone. And I know there are a number of doctors out there. And like, look, some of the information I get is from doctors who actually care and who are turning this around. Doctors who are actually speaking up and saying they didn't get the proper nutritional education and education in general on some of these topics. So am I saying everyone is bad? No. Sounds like you have a great circle and that maybe people should be paying attention to that. I advocate for people looking for the right doctors, nutritionists included. So there is a difference though, and I think you understand the difference between a doctor who's been given this nutrition education in the proper way and someone who hasn't. So that's where we're talking. Physicians are taught to treat your symptoms, not the root cause of your problem. Kimberly, I agree with all of that too. Yeah, yeah. And that was just an example, right? But that's one example. That's one story. I can't tell all the stories. I've been to multiple doctors. I worked for multiple doctors, hormone doctors, allergy doctors, urgent care doctors, infectious disease doctors, general practitioners, um, endocrinologists, and no one was able to help me. Overwhelmingly, the information that I got from all of those doctors that I worked for my medical conditions was that my metabolism was just genetically bad and that there was nothing that they could ever do to help me, that I was just always going to suffer. Now, do I struggle harder than most people with some of this stuff? Maybe so. Um, sure. Kimberly, 2 comments and you have to go. Your point is, all right. So Kimberly, I appreciate you. I appreciate your willingness to speak up on this subject, and I hope people find clinicians like you and actually get the help they need. I really do. So hard to eat right when everything is bioengineered. Exactly. Darlene, that's exactly the point, is that it does become, it should be very simple, right? But it's become extremely hard for us to maintain our health when we have all of this misinformation going on. Now, there's a big comment over here I want to read. You did pharmacology years ago, and while training, your college professor was a toxicologist being pursued by FDA for employment, but she kept refusing the offer because her passion was teaching, informing people. She made a huge point to our entire class to never allow our children to consume Coca-Cola or Mountain Dew because of the toxic effects on their bodies. And this woman worked with hazmat situations, including Ebola. Also, no aluminum containing deodorants. Those are great suggestions, Sheila. And I thank you for the comment and thank you for your input, because I think it's important for people to hear this stuff. So if we can start to understand that we're being bamboozled and we're being made sick by these false narratives, and so understand also with science, and I'll have people say, oh yeah, but your science is the same way, right? You could look at it that way. All science that comes out is really, it's funded by somebody, right? And that somebody is only going to, they have the right to say this study didn't come up with what I want it to say. And so, you know what? We're just going to take this study, we're going to put it on the shelf, we're going to throw it away, we're going to ignore that. We're going to go do another study. We're going to keep doing studies until we find one that says what we want it to say. The rest of these studies are going to get hidden because we paid for it. We don't have to let it out there. And you need to understand that this is what's happening. That's why, like when I talked the other day about fiber and the metadata, so that meant multiple studies coming up with similar answers. That's the key. So it's not just one study that says, oh, this is crazy bad for you, or this is going to work for you, or whatever. It's this culmination of studies from different sources. One of the reasons I love the protocol that I'm doing is there are study upon study upon study on fibers and whatnot. And then there are studies on these particular protocols that I'm doing themselves and how it helps people get better. So, all right. You've had several doctors and nutritionists ignore the underlying issues that was causing your PCOS. BP, do you know what was causing your PCOS? It's the GMOs. That's why people are having these issues. There, you know what? It is, Kimberly. I'm going to say I am totally on board. I think we're more closely aligned than we realize. But I agree. GMOs. And almost all of our produce is GMO now. So how do we escape it if we are not supposed to go down the boxed and bagged aisles because all of that food is toxic? And then we realize that our our meats have been messed with, and so we're trying to do better with, um, free range or grass fed or whatever, to get better there. But then we look at our produce and we realize that our produce is vastly different from what it should be as well. What are we supposed to do? Well, I think the biggest thing that we need to understand that we should do is to be able to just put back what's been stripped out. Stop focusing so much on sugar as a flavor and as this nutrition, which it's really not nutrition, and start focusing on nutrition and the fact that our food is supposed to feed us, and find out where the gaps are and why. So some of the gaps are enzymes and fibers have been stripped out along with vitamins and minerals. So they'll strip stuff out and then they'll add some back in to make it be healthy. But in reality, all of this modification, all of this manufacturing, all of this processing of our food has stripped us of these vital nutrients. And I'm not saying that anyone else has to call it a vital nutrient, but for me, fiber is a vital nutrient. And yet we're getting in, on average, less than half of what we should be in a day because of all of these issues, right? So let's take a look at that. We've talked about how these companies are pushing things like Coke, but it doesn't just end with Coke. Think about any product that a big company wants to sell people. They're going to have lobbyists and they're going to get subsidies to make sure that their food is on the top of that list. I'm still blown away by the fact that anyone would say that Cocoa Puffs are a better choice for you than beef or eggs. Like, who could put their name on that? Who would do that? Um, I don't know, but it's damaging. And here's the problem. Not everyone has the means, the time, the living situation to go through all of this. Some people are under so much attack, so much of their day between demands from kids and spouses and jobs and finances that they don't have room left to do this critical thinking about all of these things. So they're relying on the people they trust to give them the right information. And yet those people are giving us the wrong information and it's causing us to be sick. Um, oh, and I would agree. Alec, um, anything branded to kids is basically poison. I would agree with that. Like, I used to get my grandson Lunchables every once in a while, just as a treat. Like, I know it's not a perfect food. And then my daughter-in-law started telling me how high they are in heavy metals. And that anyway, the studies have just shown how toxic those things are, highly processed. I'm thinking, oh, he's getting some meat, he's getting some cheese. It's better than a candy bar. But in actuality, even that food, he may have been better off to have the candy bar than to have the Lunchable because of the amount of toxins in that food and how they get it. Dare I say that there are some studies that come out and tell us what we should have and what we shouldn't have in our food. And then food is supposed to be regulated, right? But they always find a way around getting their specific toxins into the food, not as, oh, I want to poison somebody, but this is how our food is made and these are the ingredients for it and this is our formulary. And so how are we going to do that? Well, they mess with the portion sizes. You get a big bag of chips and it has 12 or 10 or 12 servings in it. How many of you guys have taken a bag of chips and broke it down into 12 servings over 12 different days? Most of you probably not. If you're anything like me, you start getting a hold of those and all of a sudden the bag is gone. Well, now you've gone from a trace amount of toxicity to that pushed over the amount because you adjusted their portion size. How many of you guys are reading the portion size on the box of anything that you eat? Right? It is money. It is about money. So let's take it another step further. When I ate keto, I was never healthier feeling, and I actually lost weight in inches. BP, I did keto for years. And although I felt healthier, although I was doing good, I was also in the gym 6 days a week, 3 hours a day, training to be a world champion athlete, which I won 4 world championships. But it didn't stop all of the other underlying things going on, because even though I was doing keto, I still wasn't understanding the full breadth of nutrition and what has to happen in my body and my gut in order for me to be healthy and for my joints not to fail and all of that. So keto is a great step along the way, but I think understanding the nutritional pieces that we're missing is a bigger step to understanding this whole insulin resistance thing, as well as stop eating all the time. It drives me, like, I have the hardest time. I want to scream every day. I wake up and I open up my app and I see these lovely faces because they're doing it. They're doing what they think is right, just like I am. And they're telling you to eat every 2 hours, to eat smaller meals, to ditch the avocado and have a piece of toast instead. Oh my goodness. I just want to lose my mind. But that's the thing, is we have this big mess of information out there. Who do you trust and what do you do? One of the things that I had to do, and I'm going to encourage all of you to do, is start paying attention to how foods make you feel. Now, when I was full of toxins and not understanding all of this and eating all the wrong food all the time, it was really hard to tell which food was causing inflammation, which food was causing me distress. It's pretty easy now that I've cleaned up my system, because now when I get those things, it's almost immediately that I start having headaches or brain fog or inflammation in my joints, achy joints, or gastrointestinal distress. And two of the biggest foods that cause me personally the most distress are seed oils and sugar. So I know that if I have those things, I'm going to be near my bathroom all day long, in devastating with, like, if I'm just not going to leave the house if I have those things. In fact, it's gotten so bad that I know that if I'm going to go on a long trip, I don't eat those things. I'm super careful about eating those things then. But I've spent 3 years getting my system under control for me to be able to get there. Be a little more self-aware, understand what is giving you these ill effects, because it's going to be different for you than it is for me. Just because it worked for me or B or Kimberly or Melba or somebody else doesn't mean that it's going to be specifically the same for you. The protocol that I use allows us to put in nutrients and for us to eat the other foods that we need that are specific to us or our lifestyle, and still manage our insulin resistance and diabetes. The way our hormones, okay, Sheila, I love that you're giving me such like in-depth um, comments over here. So Sheila says, the way our hormones and the hormones of our developing children are also highly affected. I'll talk about that a little bit. I haven't talked about sex hormones in kids for a while, but it's super important. She also says our toxic food supply has so much to do with what's happening in the world concerning kids, puberty, and altered behavior diagnosis. The big picture, it's devastating their lives. Whew, Sheila, you nailed it. You nailed it, because look, in brief, I'm not going to have time to go into all of that this morning, but I do want you to understand. So we have this food that's imperfect that we're giving our kids. We're seeing a huge rise. I think it's like 25% or more of our children are pre-diabetic. So under 13, 25% are pre-diabetic. That's devastating. How did we get there, right? Our food is how we got there. Our food, and this little thing here, this pyramid here that they've told you is how we should eat, like the grains and then the fruits and vegetables and then the meats and then the fats at the very top. Well, flip that whole thing over, flip it right over, and put the grains up there in the very top, where that's the very least stuff we should eat, and have the proteins and the fats down at the bottom. Now we're cooking. Now we're cooking for health, right? Now we have building blocks. Now we have essential elements that the body can actually build off of and be healthy from. That sugar is causing a ton of problems. And I talked a little bit yesterday about um, the prevalence. One of the other misunderstood things, and I didn't understand it either, was with insulin resistance, it's not just a dysregulation of insulin. Long term, that insulin dysregulation and that metabolic inflexibility, not being able to switch, so training the body to burn fat or sorry, sugar for fuel all the time, creates a high need for glucagon, which I call the opposite component of insulin, and that's causing problems too. And all of this is driven by that food we're eating. So insulin resistance diabetes is not just a disease of insulin dysregulation, but it's just as much oftentimes a disease of glucagon dysregulation. So what are those two things? Insulin wants to store sugar, it wants to burn sugar for fuel, and it wants to store fat for fuel. But it thrives off of sugar. It's delivering sugar to the system. So it's pulling sugar out of your bloodstream to make sure that we don't have the damaging effects of high sugars in our bloodstream. But here's the caveat. Most of us are eating food so bad all the time that our body's kind of getting accustomed to this higher level of sugar, if you will. It still is causing damage. It's not like, oh, the effects of it are less, but our body's like craving, needing that source of energy more because that's what we've trained it to do. So then when we do fasting and we start to remove that sugar from the bloodstream, now the body goes, wait a minute. There's no sugar in the bloodstream. What are we going to do? Glucagon comes out. And although glucagon allows you to burn fat for fuel, and it's allowing ketones to come out, and it's allowing HGH to come out, it's also trying to pull more sugar into your bloodstream because that's energy. So now you can have a glucagon dysregulation problem and your sugars go really high when you're fasting because of it. So it's the same thing. People need to understand that insulin resistance is this huge umbrella term for all of these things going wrong. All of it leads back to our food, eating too much, eating imperfect food, and listening to a food industry that doesn't really care about our health. They care about their dollars, their bottom line, and you buying more of their food so that they can stay in business. If they cared about your health, they would be truthful about some of these things, and we just wouldn't even see as many packaged foods on the shelf. A lot of the packaged foods, in my opinion, I don't have a scientific study to base this. So come at me if you will, because I don't have a study to source on this one. But my opinion, after everything I've learned, is that um, we're being killed off by these foods. We started back when Ansel Keys came out and said that fat was bad for us. We started going, we got to do low fat. Well, we didn't understand that doing low fat can damage your cell membranes, can damage your cell growth, can damage a lot of other issues in the body. But they started flavoring your food with sugar because now fat gives your food a lot of flavor. If you flavor your food with fat, with the right kinds of fat, and we'll go over those, then your food tastes great. It's more satiating. You don't have the breakthrough hunger. You don't have all the sugar cravings. You don't have all this dysregulation going on. Can you have too much fat? Absolutely, you can have too much fat, just like you can have too much sugar. But we're missing that piece. And instead, we started being fed sugar. And now the food industry is like, well, we have these foods that we're feeding to these people, and they like it. It tastes good. To me, it tastes like chemicals now that I'm off of many of those. But they're like, it tastes good to them. They like it. They're not going to stay full. They're going to come back and buy more. Let's keep producing these foods that are low in nutrients, high in sugar value. They're going to keep coming back and buying more. And guess what? Cousin over there in Big Pharma, when we're done making them sick, you're going to get them so that you can give them, I don't know, metformin, Mounjaro, tirzepatide, same thing, semaglutide, Ozempic, same thing, Trulicity, all of these drugs to help them start to feel better. And yet, they're not getting better. There's one drug that's rumored to come out, and it goes along with this lobbying and whatnot, but it would cost taxpayers $12,000 a year, so about $1,000 a month for this drug, and it's being lobbied hard to be able to give it through formularies to our underserved peoples. Is it making them better? No. Is Big Pharma still getting their money because they're getting insurance dollars and tax dollars to pay for those drugs now that the people are sick? And all they really had to do was understand the food made them sick. So they don't need those drugs. It's a big circle, you see, and I know you all know this. So, oh, and the on the branded to foods to kids part, I want to tell you, now that I know what I know, now that I'm understanding things better, my whole family is getting healthier. And I want to tell you, when my kids were growing up, we didn't have soda in the fridge, we didn't have chips in the cupboard. There just wasn't those foods around. I really tried to feed them the best I could, but I was doing it from an imperfect view, and they still got sick because of it. So we had a lot of whole foods in our cupboard. Did I have some cereals in our cupboard? Yes. Did we have way too many of these carbohydrate things? Because that's what I was told we were supposed to be giving them? Yes. Did we have a lot of fruit juice instead of soda pop in the fridge? Yeah. Because how many of you guys would agree that like whole foods and fruit juice and whole grain cereals is probably healthier for your kids, and that's what you should do? That's what most of us do, right? But now I understand that fruit juice is falling into this as well. It's another marketing ploy. So the minute you start juicing food, what are you stripping out of the food to get that juice? So the idea is that the juice is giving you all of these nutrients in a manner, in an amount that you couldn't get if you were just eating them. What they're not telling you is that it's also giving you extremely high doses of fructose. And fructose is one of the leading causes of non alcoholic fatty liver, and likely one of the reasons why we're seeing children as young as 6 years old with non alcoholic fatty liver disease. And as a parent, I know it's easy to give those foods, and they're labeled and they're told that they're healthy, they're heart healthy, they're this, they're that, they're the other thing, all these nutrients in this and all these nutrients in that. And so you do the best you can with the limited knowledge you have, and you're trying to do what you can for your kids, but you're being bamboozled and you're making your kids sicker. And this is why they're ending up with prediabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and all of these other things. So we were going to talk about kids and hormones. I do want to get that in. I got to drink my tea though, because this is part of my system, and we did change the system. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. This tea is what I keep talking about. This is an older package. Our new packaging looks like this. That was just changed this year, but this is the last of my lemon ginger. So I'm just going to open it up. I'm just going to dump it in here. This water I had heated up before the live, so it still is a little bit, I overheat it. It still is warm enough to call it hot. Then I'm going to stir it up, and I'm going to start drinking this because I really need it. This tea gives me energy, mental clarity, antioxidants, anti-cancer, a ton of vitamins and minerals, and it's just amazing for what it does for my metabolism. Jack LaLanne, the first one who juiced everything. Actually, Movie Mama, I do. And he looked great, right? I have not gone in to see if anybody's done studies on Jack. Now, the one thing with Jack that I'm going to say, and then I want to get back to the kids thing, is that I know that he was doing what he felt was best for everyone. But Jack also had an extremely active lifestyle. Okay, Jack was working out a lot. Jack was moving his body all the time. Jack could take a higher load of some of these sugars than most of us. Would it still likely cause a load on his liver? I would be interested to see if there was ever any liver studies done on him and what that looked like. Now, Jack wasn't just juicing fruits, though. He was juicing everything. So trying to get those nutrients in. And you know what? I did that for a while. I remember having a juicer. I remember doing in the medical medium book, that big $50 book is still on my shelf. He does a lot of diagnosing through food. And I read through his book, and I found all the symptoms I had, and I wrote down everything that I was suffering with, and I wrote down all the supplements he had, and I made this big list, and I compiled it down to all the supplements that were similar for all of these health issues that I had, and I crafted this shake that I would drink every morning to try and get those nutrients in. That's a lot of work. And I'm going to tell you, by the time I spent the money on all of those supplements, I spent way more than I spent on the system in the yeah, he was pulling boats in the bay. Absolutely. Somebody with that kind of physical activity can afford a little bit more of that nutrition than the rest of us. But the truth is, the rest of us do not pull boats in the bay. We cannot sustain that kind of sugar intake. And when it comes to our kids, so I talk a lot about PCOS. You talked about PCOS earlier. PCOS is definitely metabolic infertility. More and more people are starting to debunk this. I'm heavy because of genetics. I have this because of genetics. I have that because of genetics. Well, no, if that's true, most of us, then why 100 years ago weren't our family members suffering with the same things? Do we have a genetic disposition into not being able to transfer junk into our system as healthy? Probably, probably. Okay, so kids, there's a hormone dysregulation that goes on. And I've talked about it in relation to PCOS. I've talked about in relation to erectile dysfunction, vascularity with erectile dysfunction, but it also changes how a man's body converts and uses testosterone and estrogens, just like it does for a girl's body. Now, interestingly enough, at the turn of the century, kids were going through puberty at about age of 16. I think it was about 20 years ago that age dropped to about the age of 12 or 13. Can you guys type in a number? What is reported to be the average age our kids are going through puberty now? Do you guys know what that age is now? Because it's not 16. We know that, right? We know that. When we look at what's going on with our kids and the problems they're having and the sexual confusion they're having and the mood dysregulation they're having and all of that, it all has to do with hormones. So do you guys know what that age is? Does anybody care to guess what age? Yeah. You guys are spot on. So about 8 is the average age now. All right, 8 to 9. So there's a lot of you guys who got that right. So if we're taking about 7 years off of puberty, so now a child whose brain is not functioning the same that it would at the age of 16, certainly not the same that it would at the age of 21. Now that brain has this influx or imbalance of hormones causing this child who does not have the physical life maturity to deal with these hormones yet, because we're designed in a way for a reason. Now they're being confused. Now they're being depressed. Now they're having things that they can't understand and their body's just not ready for. So one of the things that happens when a boy goes through puberty younger and a girl, they're more likely to be diabetic as they get older, and they're also more likely to have infertility problems as they get older. So a young man who gets pre-diabetic, diabetic, and starts to go through puberty early, sure, he's going to have this intense sexual urge as his hormones are flooding, and he's going to have this time period where things are just really out of balance, and he maybe seems like a rabid little rabbit, right? But what's going to happen in the long term is that all of that hormone dysregulation dampens. Now he starts ending up with erectile dysfunction, an inability to be aroused, inability to have normal function in that way. It's not something that's comfortable for us to talk about. And I'm totally like, this is uncomfortable for me too, because child trafficking is horrendous to me. So this is a horrible conversation, but a necessary conversation to have. So let's think about that. If we want to really go down a rabbit hole, why would we want our kids to go through puberty and to have these feelings earlier and earlier? Well, I think you guys can put that one together. I'm not going to even voice that out, but think about that. So our kids are being forced into puberty earlier than their brains can handle, and now we're having children with problems. And when we look at things like ADHD, I'm ADHD and I'm autistic. And the more I learn, the more I understand all of this stuff that's happened to me for 60 years. Childhood trauma and transitioning. I transitioned earlier than all my counterparts. Like I was wearing a bra, had breasts before any of the other girls in my class. Do you think that there wasn't some harassment for me from the boys because I had boobs when the other girls didn't? I had curves when the other girls didn't. Yeah, and I didn't know what to do with that. I was terrified of it at the time. So we're putting our kids in situations because of the food that they're not meant to be in, and that's really damaging and unhealthy and putting them at risk. And it's a whole other talk, but understand that insulin resistance is putting your children through puberty way too quickly, like about half the age that they should be going through it. and that causes devastating effects in their psyche as well as their body. It affects their growth plates and the way their bones are growing and maturing. It affects a ton of things in their body. So now we have kids who are dysregulated with their sex hormones. We have kids whose bones are more brittle, who's are having more joint problems, all because of the food that we gave them and they went through puberty too early. Um, oh, you're so welcome, Sheila. Like, look, you guys, one of the things that I talk about, sometimes it's embarrassing to have to talk about some of the things that I talk about, but I have this true belief that everything I've been through in my life is for a reason. When we look at the Clifton Strengths thing, optimism or positivity is one of my top strengths and always has been. That's because I had a dad who always told me there was always good in everything that happened, and I just had to find it. So I had a lot of programming for that early on. But if I experience something horrible, or I see someone or have heard and I don't share it and somebody else is going through it, then I'm a selfish asshole, really. And I don't want to be that. I want to share and help other people. And look, if you like what I say and you want to stick out here and you want to understand all this stuff, great. If you don't agree with what I say, go find somebody who you do agree with. Really, because we all have a choice, right? So I'm a warrior of truth. I love that name. That just like popped right up as I'm talking. So thank you all. Thank you all. So all right, so we understand the food is the problem. We understand that. We understand that. I'm going to get to the solution a little bit, and then if we have time, I'll talk about whatever we need to. But please understand that our food is not what you think you're getting. It's just not the same. It's not giving you the nutrition you need. It's giving you way too much sugar, and it's causing us to be sick. So what the company that I work with does is we have this protocol. Now, it went through a change recently, so I'm going to explain this as best as I can. We have a class on it tonight, so I'll know more about it tomorrow. But so the system that I know and love, the one that reduced my or reversed my diabetes, my A1C was 7.4, it's now 5.3. My blood pressure is 110 over 70 every day. My lipid panels are all in normal range. All of that stuff is in normal range. All I did and got me off of 13 medications was a tea in the morning and a pre-meal drink before I eat anything. The pre-meal drink is 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers. Again, we're plugging some of the gaps that have been created in our nutritional system, and that's why it works. Dare I say, in my opinion, better than medications because it's not causing the damage and we're getting the same end effect. So that's what the system has been. And I will probably always do the system this way because I'm a huge believer of fiber. Now, there's a lot of studies coming out that show that this fiber, especially when we have a specialized fiber like this, can stay in your system. I was always thinking, I want to start eating within 20 minutes. I want to be done eating within 40 minutes to an hour because that fiber is going to work its way out of my system. Well, there are multiple studies that are showing that the fiber, that high quality fiber like that, can stay in our system for 4, 5, and 6 hours after we ingest it. So now that means that in many, many studies, somebody who had fiber before breakfast saw a blood glucose reduction, and I'm not talking this fiber, I'm just talking general fibers, a blood glucose reduction of 13%. With this, it ups it to about 20%. Now, the interesting thing was, by the time they had lunch, about 4 to 5 hours later, even without adding an extra fiber in, the blood glucose spike was down about 60% from that morning fiber that they took. Okay, so then if they did another packet of fiber before bed, then or before their dinner meal, they had a 30% reduction, building on the fiber throughout the day, 30% reduction in blood glucose. So fiber is king to me. Fiber is like the one thing that helps me with all my IBS and all of those other issues that I have, helps me be regular, helps my gut not be bloated and all of that, and just helps me with inflammation and whatnot all the time. Gut microbiome being better. We talk about this on other lives all the time. So that's my life every day. Now, what the system is doing now, we noticed that many people were like, well, if 16:8 is good, then I'm going to do OMAD. And a lot of people my age only do OMAD anyway for monetary concerns and just because their lives have slowed down and they understand that they don't need the caloric load, the nutrition load that they used to need. So they eat one meal a day. So a lot of people were having this thing where they used up all their Unimate, but they had leftover balance and yet they were wanting more Unimate. The company went to work and did some studies. Well, the interesting thing with this Unimate is this grade of yerba mate is 375 times more potent than any bagged yerba mate you can get, but it's also extremely clean. This can increase the action of glucagon-like peptide 1, which is what those drugs, Mounjaro, Trulicity, all of those are trying to do. This can naturally do it without all the damaging side effects by 70%. So now we have satiety, we have fat burning going on, we have this great space where we're in some fasting, so we're getting some cellular turnover going on, but yet this is high in nutrients, A, B, C, D, E, K, and vitamins, not just vitamins, but minerals as well. Things like chromium, magnesium are highly present in this. So now what we're doing is a tea in the morning, which I'm having now. And guess what? I've always been doing this anyway. So I'll finish this tea and then I have an iced tea ready to go. And then throughout the course of the day, I'll drink the rest of this. So a tea in the morning, a tea in the afternoon. You know, that afternoon where after you eat, you feel like, oh, I'm tired. How am I going to make it through the day? This. It's building your heart health. It's giving you satiety. It's giving you brain health. It's giving you antioxidants. It's giving you all of that and getting you through that afternoon slump or that mid-shift slump. And then what we're doing, we're not forgetting the fiber, right? So you're going to have this before your biggest meal, the one with the most carbohydrates. Now, it's interesting to me, theory in my head, right? So I'm thinking that what I would want to do is probably have, if this is going to be dampening carbohydrates for 4 to 5 hours, and I shorten that window of eating from 8 hours to 5 hours, still get two meals in. If I did one of these, I would just do it before the meal with the most amount of carbohydrates or before my first meal of the day, knowing that the effects of that fiber are going to last me for about 5 hours, according to metadata analysis of many studies showing that it can do that. Okay, what causes type 1 diabetic? Type 1 diabetic is, so diabetes is really an insulin dysregulation disease, right? Whether it's type 2 or type 1. Now, the difference is type 2, insulin is created in our pancreas. Type 2, insulin is being created from the pancreas. It's just not able to create enough to deal with the load of sugar that we're eating. Type 1 can't produce insulin from their pancreas. No go. Doesn't happen. Not, the factory's shut down, right? So now a type 1 diabetic has none of this thing that carries the energy to the cells. And can you imagine how devastating that is? Whether you're eating a small amount of sugar or a big amount of sugar, you can't get that sugar into your cells without some insulin. Insulin's not a bad guy. It's a bad guy when it becomes overwhelming and a bully, but type 1 diabetics just can't produce insulin. And so they have this huge blood sugar dysregulation problem. So especially for type 1 diabetics, I would still go with 2 balance in a day to make sure that I'm capturing those blood sugar spikes and allowing the load of insulin to come down. And with that, we've had a number of type 1 diabetics use the system to manage that disease much easier for them. They've lost weight, their moods are better, anxiety is better. All of the same things that type 2 diabetics suffer with, type 1 diabetics suffer with it too. They're just having to inject insulin, where type 2 diabetics should never be injecting insulin or injecting insulin. So does that answer the question? I hope it does. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll try to come at it a different way. Okay, so an interesting thing, I am almost with bated breath waiting for these studies to be completed, but they're now studying the fact that they suspect that even type 1 diabetics that disease can be reversed. Don't have all the data as to how and the mechanisms of it, but there are some promising studies that show that they can, with some of these guidelines like we're talking about, um, that type 1 diabetics over the years may have some help because they're studying ways that it can be reversed. All right. So, yeah, me too, San. Me too. That's why I'm so excited about these studies. And I really hope that they do them thoroughly, but quickly, because I want to know how they're starting to see this reversal of type 1 diabetes. So type 2 on insulin. So let's talk about insulin in type 2 diabetics. If we understand, and again, I'm going to preface this with this: I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a woman who got really sick, like most of y'all are feeling, and I got better. And I was shocked that the way to get better was not all the medications and all the stuff. It was simply this protocol that I just showed you, and we're going to talk about it again. But type 2 diabetes, my A1C was only at 7.4. 7.4 is devastating, by the way, but not as devastating as, like, I had a guy who said his A1C was at 14. I've had clients of my own who I've worked with whose A1C has been 11 and upwards of 13. Now, if you're not familiar, those A1C numbers are deathly. Okay, deathly. So we want to get that A1C number down. Now, people will say, but my A1C is not high, but my blood glucose isn't high. That was me for years. Did it mean that I wasn't insulin resistant? No, it did not. It meant that the medical community didn't understand how to look at, diagnose, and put together all my symptoms to understand that this one thing was what was wrong the whole time. So back to the injecting insulin. If your body is already producing too much insulin because we're putting too much sugar, unregulated sugar, unpackaged sugar. Fiber is the package that all sugars should come in. If it has carbohydrates in it, it should have fiber with it to help slow down the delivery of that sugar into your system. We've been stripped of fibers, right? But what's happening is your pancreas is being asked to do more work than it should, and it cannot keep up with the load of insulin that it needs to help dampen the sugars that are going through unregulated. Regulate the sugars, the insulin isn't needed. Now, if you're already resistant to insulin because your body's putting out its max load and it's not enough, is the solution to add more insulin? Insulin, remember, is going to make you fatter. It stores fat, does not allow fat to be burnt. Insulin makes you sicker because high insulin levels are already the problem. Your cells are reluctant to take in insulin. So if your cells are shutting down, throw away the key, the door is locked, insulin can't come in, is adding more insulin the answer to the problem, or is regulating the sugar that comes in? And not just the amount of sugar, the timing that it comes in, is that the answer? So Dr. Ben Bikman says this, and he explains it far more eloquently than I could ever imagine. He wrote this book, Why We Get Sick. He's one of the top metabolic scientists in the world. Look him up on YouTube. There are days, weeks, months worth of podcast interviews from this man talking about metabolic health and all things metabolic health. What he says, what he goes around the world and educates doctors, diabetes doctors, is, and at the end of his presentation, when he shows them all the why, what he says is, giving insulin to type 2 diabetics is making them sicker quicker, it's making them fatter quicker, and it's killing them quicker. Question your doctor why you're on insulin if you're type 2 diabetic, and ask them if there's a better way. So that's and this system that I'm talking about is the way that many people have gotten off of insulin shots, gotten off of metformin, gotten off of Ozempic and all of those things, and been able to maintain their health more naturally. So I have a woman who's lost over 160 pounds, a guy who's lost 190 pounds. Both of them were told to have gastric bypass. Both of them were told to have all these medications, and neither one of them did it. They did the system instead, and they got their health back without causing all the damage and all the problems with implicated with surgeries. By the way, every time you have a surgery, every time you have an injury and it creates a traumatic response in your body that creates inflammation, that sets you up to be more insulin resistant. Inflammation and insulin resistant are negative towards each other. So inflammation can cause you to be more likely to be insulin resistant. Insulin resistant increases the inflammation in your body. He put you on insulin because I was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney failure. Oh, all right. So understand that a majority of kidney failure is a result of too much insulin. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I have a guy who had stage 3 kidney disease, was able to reverse it with this same system, even though he was being told surgery, dialysis, probably many of the similar things you were told. And he was like, you know what? If before I go through all of that, I'm going to try this and see if it works. And he was like, Doc, we're waiting. We're going to hold on for the 90 days that they say I'll see change, and we'll see what happens at that point. His stage 3 kidney failure was reversed. No longer even looking at dialysis. Kidneys. So I talked about this yesterday. There's 3 organs that use up energy and are the most metabolically sensitive. And kidneys is one, heart is one, and brain is one. Okay, those are the top 3. We're going to have to throw liver in there at some point. But the top 3 organs that are make us insulin sensitive or insulin resistant or become insulin resistant are kidneys, heart, and brain. So this is what I did, and this is what I want everyone to do. I really honestly want everyone to do this, not because I make a buck off of it, because I actually care about your health. So what I'm going to tell you is what you just need to do is understand that our food is imperfect. The way we eat and what we're doing is causing us to be sick. Now, you get coaching with me too. And look, there's no meal plans, none of that. I'm just going to look at your lifestyle and say, hey, maybe we should tweak this or tweak that. I'm not going to give you a product and say, here, you're out on your own. If you need help, you need help, and I'm going to help you fit this into your daily life. You're going to implement some intermittent fasting because us eating all the time is the problem. Okay. So if we learn to start switching metabolically, and what I'm talking about is when we eat, we're increasing blood sugar, which means we're increasing insulin. When we fast, meaning we're not putting food in, it takes about 8 to 10 hours to get to this point, by the way. Glucagon comes out, which is trying to increase our blood sugar so that we have energy, but it's doing it by pulling it out of fat cells, by pulling it out of your liver, by pulling it out of other areas so that there's energy in your bloodstream. So we need to learn to switch between burning sugar for fuel and burning fat for fuel. That's metabolic flexibility. Sometimes we burn sugar, sometimes we burn fat. Most of us are stuck in sugar burning mode because we're eating all the time and we're eating food that's high in sugar and low in fiber. And now we have this blood glucose dysregulation. Cause of fibro. I am not a doctor. So matriarchal clan, I could look it up and give you some answers, but I'm not a doctor to answer all of those ones. I look at insulin resistance, but I would be interested in looking up and seeing if there's a link between fibroid myomas and insulin resistance. Because I'm going to have to say gut level after looking up other things. Then here, we just need to understand that, Denise, you're on the protocol having a hard time increasing protein in your diet. So although I am not a huge advocate of protein shakes and any like liquefied nutrition, I do it myself sometimes. Denise, you know what I did yesterday? Because I knew that I needed to up my protein, but I didn't really want to take the time to cook my eggs and sausage or whatever in the morning. And I was running yesterday. I actually did this. I'm going to admit it. So I took my water and I put it in a shaker bottle, you know, like one of those little protein shaker bottles. I put my fiber in it. I put 40 grams of protein in it. And I think I put a little collagen in there too. Shook it up and chugged it down to get 40 grams of protein in, get my fiber in, and not have to worry about making a big meal. Now, my other meals of the day, like I had a steak and cheese wrap thing, and then I had a couple of chicken thighs. Those were my two biggest meals of the day. So it's not hard to get in protein. It just is an adjustment because most of us have not been protein focused. So if you purchase through me, Denise, text me. You should have my number, and let's hop on a call and see what I can do to help give you some suggestions on how to get the protein in. And this is one of the reasons I'm not a fan of OMAD. You guys, if we're supposed to be getting in 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight, how in the literal living hell are we going to get 150 grams of protein in one meal? Now, they used to say that if you ate protein above 40 or 50 grams, that you just excreted the rest of it. Don't go above that. It's not worth it. New studies are showing that that's not exactly how it goes. Up to about 100 grams of protein, you can eat that protein in one sitting. Immediately, your body's going to take about 40 to 50 grams and start processing it for building blocks. The rest of it, it's going to kind of hold on to. As you go through the rest of the day, in a time-lapsed kind of way, it's going to start pulling the other 40 to 50 grams and utilizing it as well. So even if you're eating 2 meals a day, you can do 70 to 75 grams of protein and still get to your 150. That's my ideal number, in 2 meals. Now, it may be hard to do that. So as long as you're eating in an 8-hour window and not snacking, maybe you do a protein shake for one of those just to get that amount of protein in. So maybe you have a meal, and then midway through you have a protein shake, and then you have your dinner to finish it off, or you have your 2 meals and then you have your protein shake, which is easier to digest towards the end of the day. Idiopathic small fiber neuropathy, your blood sugar is fine. Yeah, idiopathic small fiber neuropathy, that may or may not be linked to insulin resistance. So understand with that one, I'm going to write that one down too, because I want to get a better answer for you on that. Neuropathy. Neuropathy happens with insulin resistance. Well, first off, let's go back to the part where your blood sugars can be fine. We now understand that I was probably insulin resistant for about 40 years, and yet my blood sugars were fine. They were fine until they weren't, and then it was almost like overnight. I went in for a physical. Numbers were fine, starting to climb a little bit, but fine. 3 months later, they're climbed higher. 3 months later, they're higher. 3 months later, they're higher. And it was just like this rampant raise of my blood sugars, and nothing had changed. So with insulin resistance, what insulin resistance really means is there's too much sugar coming into your system. It's trying to deliver the sugar, and it's struggling to deliver the sugar in where it should be. So a lot of the places that it's going to store sugar when it can't get it to the cells is in your fat cells. Those are taking up the excess sugar, so it's not showing up in your bloodstream. But all the while, this excess insulin and this dysregulation of energy being able to go to the cells causes neural pattern misfiring. So instead of neurons or nerve pathways firing end to end and going, hey, I got a message. Okay, I'll take the message. It's like, hey, I got a message, but oops, it went out the side this way. Sorry, you didn't get that message. Oops, this one went out that way. You still didn't get that message. Now you're having some neuropathy and some like random electrical pains throughout because these messages aren't transferring properly. There's a dysfunction in them caused by too much sugar and insulin being resisted in the system. So I'll be interested to look up that small pattern, that idiopathic small fiber neuropathy, and see what links are there. Okay. And I'm more than happy to do that. So check back with me tomorrow because I'll look that up and we'll talk about it tomorrow. How to reverse insulin resistance. It's this simple. You want to do 6 simple things that I'm going to give you. You can do these with or without the protocol. The protocol absolutely makes it easier. So you want to get in fiber first before you eat, every time you eat. I'll talk about the difference between this fiber and others in a minute. You want to prioritize protein. The first thing that you should clean up off of your plate is protein. There have been multiple studies, anecdotal and clinical studies, that show that when you change the order of your food, it changes the blood glucose spike. So simply by not having all of the carbohydrates at the beginning of the meal and the protein at the end, which is how I was raised, we're going to switch that. You're going to do protein first, and you want to prioritize protein as a nutrient. It's a building block. It still gives you some blood sugars. It does a lot for your body. You need protein for your heart, your liver, all of those tissues. All of your tissues need protein, and they need fat because the membrane around those cells is built up of fat. So fiber first to help regulate the blood sugars. Get in about, for most of us, it's going to be, unless you're a tiny person, about 50 to 70 grams of protein per sitting. 50 grams is probably great for most of us. Then you want to fill up with fat. So the fats that I'm talking about are extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, butter, ghee, and animal fats. Yes, the yolk of your egg. Leave it in there. Stop taking it out. You need those fats in order for your body to metabolize the protein that comes along with it in the egg white properly. Remove the yolk. The egg white protein does not get dissolved or metabolized the same way as it does when the yolk is present. So stop doing yourself this dysfunction of not being able to take in the protein because you removed the fat. So fiber, protein, fat. Then you're going to limit your carbs. The last thing you should eat off of your plate is your carbs. Now, if you're talking the dark green vegetables, you can maybe have some of those at the beginning as fiber, right? But like potatoes, rice, breads, those things should be at the very end of your meal. Now, what's going to happen with that is proteins are the most satiating of those nutrients. So now you've given yourself building blocks, the ability to have the glucose for energy that you need, and it's keeping you satiated longer. So guess what? You have less breakthrough for sugar cravings and salt cravings. When you add the fat to that, fat is the second most satiating of those macronutrients, and it doesn't spike your insulin. So when you combine the protein and the fat, you're getting a lower insulin spike. You're getting a lot of building blocks and tools for your body to work off of, and energy, because fat, when you're ingesting dietary fat, it's cueing your body that, hey, fat is the source of energy that we need to go to. So whoop, your body starts to shift into fat burning mode when fat is the primary source of calories and not carbohydrates. So again, fiber first, prioritize protein, don't fear fats, limit your carbs. Now, the last 2 of those 6 are going to be this. You must start doing some intermittent fasting. And that sounds scary to many people, but intermittent fasting just means stop putting food in your face every 15 minutes. Stop eating all day. We're not built for it. We're not supposed to do that. Eat your meal, put the food away. And how many of you guys, I remember, like, look, this is my childhood. We grew up in North Idaho, super Christian mom, native dad, back in the time when having a Cadillac was the cool thing. So my dad worked really hard and he bought my mom this beautiful Cadillac. But I remember making long distance trips in this Cadillac. We would go from Idaho to Montana. We would travel to southern Idaho. We would travel to whatever. I remember trips to Utah and whatnot to visit family, friends, whatever. But the big thing is, in the back of this big old Cadillac, we didn't have any snacks. We didn't have sodas. We didn't have any of that. We didn't even think about needing food to put in our face every 5 minutes while we're driving down the road. We just didn't. We had a meal before we left. We stopped for a meal part way, and there were no snacks. We have been sold into this idea that we need to snack because somebody's benefiting by you eating that much. But when you eat that much, you're making yourself sick. So number 5 is do some intermittent fasting. And it's super easy. You can do it on a 16 and 8 window. You can, if you're highly dysregulated with glucose and glucagon, then maybe you want to start with a 12-hour fast and start working your way into it. I help work with you through that. And then the last thing is going to be, we talked about Jack LaLanne, right? And he was juicing and he was doing all these things, but he was pulling boats in the harbor. Move your body. And this is the one that I am the most efficient in right now. Probably most of the struggles I'm currently having are simply because I don't move my body enough. And I'm aware of it. And I need to take care of it. Move your body. Get in at least 30 minutes of exercise a day. And that doesn't have to be all at once. It can be a 10-minute walk here, a 10-minute walk there. It can be doing some, one of the followers, thank you if you're here, Tabata squats. So squat for 20 seconds and then take a 10-second break and do it again. Do 8 rounds of it. It takes about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. You're going to get great cardio and a little bit of weight bearing exercise. Now you want to add a backpack with some weight on it to do those squats. I do it. I have a couch that's a little bit lower. So I pull up the footrest or just stand right next to the couch and do the squats off the couch so that if I lose balance, I'm 60, I'm not going to fall and break myself. Although I used to squat over 400 pounds in competition just fine. Doing it at home is different. So move your body. Preferably get in some weight-bearing exercise. This is not about hours long of cardio. Get some weight on your joints. So yeah, take that walk with a backpack on. Whether it's 20 pounds, whether it's 30 pounds, put some weight in that backpack and walk with it. Ankle weights, wrist weights, whatever. Get your muscles resisting and carrying a little bit of extra weight from time to time, and that's going to help with insulin resistance. Now, the system that I do helps because during those fasting moments, this tea is shutting down my hunger. It's helping me burn more fat for fuel when I'm in a fasted state. It's not breaking my fast. So I drink this in the morning, which is what I'm drinking now. It gives me energy. And it does all those other amazing things. Now, my blood pressure was 180 over 150 when I started. It's now 110 over 70. I'm not on any medications. People who write me and say, I'm worried about the tea because I have a heart problem. We have a cardiologist, Dr. Ahmed, and his video is in there in my playlist somewhere. I'll try and find it again. But he recommends it to every one of his patients that come through his clinic. He uses it himself. Tea in the morning, helping me with fasting, helping me with that glucagon-like peptide action that's helping me feel satiated, slowing down the delivery of food into my gastrointestinal system so blood sugar spikes aren't as quick and heavy. And I have a ton of energy, which the more you have energy, the less hungry you are, because hunger is just telling your body that you need energy. Okay. Hunger is the body's cry for energy. But if you're getting energy to your body, then those cravings start to shut down. And then I add this fiber in before I eat. Now I do it every time I eat because I want to protect myself from those blood sugar spikes, and this reduces it by 20%. They're real food products. It's some of the only real food products in the prescriber's digital reference. So that's amazing. Your doctor can look it up. Your pharmacist can look it up. You can go look it up and see that there's no long-term negative side effects. The biggest side effect is that you may have some gas and bloating at first because you're just not used to this amount of fiber and your gut's got to get stronger and healthier. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. So all the doctors say exercise, stop sugar, not helping. So that's because, okay. Lots of questions came through. Am I lying? No, not lying at all. Unfortunately, it did not purchase from you. So reach out to your coach, Denise, and they should be able to help you with that and getting through that. And if you want me for your coach, we can have a talk about that too. IF is only easy when I drink. Yeah, it does. Like I was told about intermittent fasting. My son talked to me about intermittent fasting for years before I ever started the protocol. I kept trying, but I kept failing because I just wasn't getting there. I do want to come back to ADHD and how all this links in, but this tea helps keep me so I'm not hungry. So I'm not having those breakthrough cravings and all of that hunger. Plus it's keeping me from drinking a bunch of negative stuff for my body. PCOS, when you have high DHEAs but low test and estrogen, Your testosterone is probably high, can be a little bit low. With PCOS, what's happening is your ovaries, so ovaries in women, testicles in men, similar organs, they just mature out differently. But we're going to talk about women because we're talking about PCOS. Ovaries, they're this little factory that convert your androgens into estrogens, and they do a lot of other things for our system. But with PCOS, this high blood sugar is causing disarray so that it's not taking the androgens, testosterone, and converting it into estrogen. Most ladies with PCOS are going to have high estrogen or high testosterone levels, low estrogen levels, meaning they're going to have hair on their face, but they're going to be losing hair on their head. They're going to have acne. They're going to have fatigue. They're going to have anxiety. They're going to have outbursts of anger. Okay, so it all comes down to simple, like 30-second explanation. It still comes down to the high blood sugars that's causing the ovaries to malfunction and not convert testosterone into estrogen, so you can have your cycle normally and have your estrogen and testosterone levels. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, especially ladies, your estrogen and testosterone levels not only range throughout the month, but throughout the day. So you're going to have times when your testosterone is lower, your estrogen is higher, and that's normal. But if your testosterone and estrogen are low all the time, that's worth a look at seeing what could be going on. Now, for me, what I would say is I would do the system for 90 days and see if that starts to normalize. If it does, great, you found the root cause. If it doesn't, you get your money back and you at least have ruled out something, right? So all the doctors say is exercise, stop sugar, and that's not helping. Because again, even our raw organic foods, and sugar is present in so many things that we just don't know. So most of us think sugar and we think, okay, well, there's that bag of white stuff, and I'm just going to cut that out. And so no candy bars, no soda pops, no any of that. But what they're failing to realize is a lot of our boxed and bagged food is high in sugar. A lot of our produce has been modified so that they've stripped fibers out and pumped up the sugar. And you're not seeing those fruits and vegetables as sugar, right? So you're probably eating way more of those, and it depends on the body. Some people's bodies can metabolize it better than others. The one thing that's going to help with all of that is to add the fiber in so that it slows down the blood sugar. What happens with this particular fiber that I keep waving, it's not the Metamucil. I don't have that junk can around here, so it's on the floor back there because I toss it because I get so mad at it. That's one type of fiber, the Metamucil benefiber. That hasn't been proven to, it can minorly help, but it's not going to do the job. This has 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers in it. They create a gel matrix in your gut, start to fill you up before you eat. Now your cravings are down. Now you're wanting to eat less because your gut's already getting full from that fiber. But then when you do eat, those fibers creating this thick gel matrix are slowing down the delivery of that food, that sugar, into your intestines, where it's absorbed as sugar into your bloodstream, raising your blood sugars. So if you're not getting fiber and the food is going through you too quickly, you're probably malnourished but have high blood sugar levels. So get fiber in before you eat. Correct fasting hours for overweight women over 50. So that's me, right? So your fasting window, you guys, let's be honest. The biggest way that we talk about fasting with the 16-8 is to have it at have your first meal, your breakfast at lunch, and then your dinner at about 6 when your family's home, right? That has been designed to make it easier for you guys, because most people, the one meal that they're all together for is dinner. And so we don't want to impede people's family life. But if you're really asking what's going to work best for you, this is what I would recommend. It's what I'm trying to work myself into. I'm going to be eating earlier in the day. There will probably come a day when I have my first meal before this live, and then I'll have my last meal around noon or 2 o'clock, and then I'll be done eating for the day. At 50 years old, I would start with a breakfast that's high in protein and fats. And if you do that early in the day, okay, and then 4 to 6 hours later, have a lunch. Now, that lunch, if you want to have some pasta, some bread, some whatever, do that. Have what you like at that meal. And I would just have it the fiber beforehand and then stop eating. Why have an earlier fasting window if you're talking about strictly for health? A number of reasons. Your blood glucose levels change throughout the day, and your body responds to glucose and utilizes it differently throughout the day. Higher glucose levels in the evening, your body is starting to shut down, so it's not wanting to burn up that glucose and sugar at the end of the day as much as it would at the beginning of the day. You're also putting heavy, like, most of us, I was raised in North Idaho on a small family farm. And so dinner time was like some sort of beef or rarely did we eat chicken. We eat a lot of beef, and some vegetables and maybe some pasta, whatever. We didn't have a lot of pasta in my house, but now you have all this heavy food in your gut that takes 4 to 6 hours to digest. So if you eat that meal at 6 p.m. and you're looking at about 6 hours for it to really digest through, it's about midnight before the body's done with that heavy digestion. Now, if you push that meal back later, now you're looking at 2 p.m., 2 a.m. or whatever before your body's done. Your body can't rest when it's really trying to digest all those foods. 50-year-old woman in menopause, wanting to lose weight, wanting to be healthier, I would have protein and fats in the morning. I would have a bigger meal at lunch with carbohydrates, and I would try to stop eating by 2, 3 p.m. at the most and allow your body to rest. Now you're going to do your fast while you sleep instead of in the first thing in the morning. You're still going to wake up, have your tea for energy, have your tea in the afternoon. That's going to help with satiety. And guess what? If at the end of the day you're still hungry in the beginning, I just throw in an extra balance because that fiber helps me feel fuller and it's feeding my gut microbiome. That's what I would do. I hope that's a long kind of circular way around it, but that's what I would do. Earlier in the day, proteins and fats. Midday, have your last meal between noon and 2 and add your carbohydrates in there. Stop eating after that. Allow your body to digest and then move your body in those last few hours of the day to help that digest through. Go to bed, allowing your body to fast and recuperate and regenerate. Okay. I hope that answers that. Okay. All right, you guys, I'm going to go. I'll be back in the morning. I do have fibroid myomas and idiopathic small fiber neuropathy that I'm going to look up. And so hopefully I'll have some answers for you guys in the morning about if this links to insulin resistance and how. And then we will talk about, maybe I was going to talk about kidneys today, but maybe I need to talk about kidneys tomorrow and all the ways insulin resistance is causing kidney failure and kidney diseases. Because if it's one of the top 3 organs that's affected by insulin resistance, one of the first 3 organs that's affected by insulin resistance, it's really important to talk about. And hopefully we save somebody from having to go through the rest of their life on dialysis. Maybe I did overlook your question. Would you ask it again, please, Christina? And I will wait until, let me see if I can find it. What can you recommend for detox because of skin issues, bloating, gastro issues, parasites, etc.? Okay. What I do for a detox looks like this. We have a system called Cleanse that I do twice a year, and I probably will be doing the Cleanse again next month. Realizing that it's been about 6 months. I didn't realize it's been that long. But our Cleanse goes like this. There's some tablets. They're herbal tablets that I take in the morning. They're called Paraway Plus. What those do is start to kill off those bacteria and parasites and allow them to be released from the gut, from the intestinal tract. Then about an hour later, I have this other fiber that has about 27 different components in it. Some of it plant components that help support this detox, but about 27 different types of fiber and components in this that I'll have mid-morning after I have my Paraway. The reason I do that one, it does not spike my insulin. It actually helps push me into fat burning more, but it's also clearing out those parasites as they're released from the system. So instead of allowing them to sit in there and go, oh, hey, they didn't do anything about moving me on, so I'm just going to kind of reabsorb. We want to release the parasites and then we want to get them out. So Paraway in the morning, and then I do a fiber about an hour to 2 hours later to clear that out. Then I go on about the rest of my day with my fiber before my meals. before bed, we have an aloe vera laxative tablet that I take that helps just move the rest of that waste on through in a really gentle way. So you're just continually cleansing. That's the detox that I use. If you really want to do a detox, then look into anti-inflammatory foods. Of course, cut out things like fruit juice and soda pop during that time, and anything that's high in heavy metal. So tuna, those things, keep away from those during your detox. And maybe start to take some digestive enzymes to help you with the digestion process. Now, during the detox, and this is something that I do daily now that I'm understanding my gut health better, is this morning I had my tea, right? But the thing you guys don't see behind the scenes is that I have that fiber, the 27 different type of fiber with some super greens, high dense nutrients, and some collagen. Shake it up. And this morning I put my element, my electrolytes in there as well. So interesting taste, right? Maybe not the best taste, but I do it for my health. So I drink that down. Now I've got fiber and I've got super greens in. I've got electrolytes in, and I'm helping my body clear out in a fasted state. Those things do not increase my insulin, so I can have those during the fasted state for our purposes. I do that daily now as I'm trying to get my gut microbiome together. We also have, I think I threw the packet away. We have some prebiotic or some probiotics that come in a smaller tube than this, and I just pour it on my tongue. It tastes like, remember those pixie sticks that you would pour on your tongue, a little bit sweet, powdery thing? That's what the probiotics we do does. And so I wait about 20 minutes after the fiber and whatnot. Then I add the probiotics in. Then the rest of it's the system. So that's what I would do for a detox. Make sure the super greens. I use our super greens, but those are so nutritionally dense. I really like them as part of a detox plan. So you're removing parasites, but the super greens are giving you nutrition back in as you're cleaning up. So I hope that answers for you what question you wanted. And Christina, or Christine, so if you guys go to my profile link and tap on that, there's a picture up in there. Right below it and below my picture are some red light symbols, and below that is a link. If you click on that link, that gives you my website, and it also gives you my WhatsApp. Just reach out to me on WhatsApp and we can talk about it. I'm not pressury, I'm not salesy. Look, if you choose to do the system and help your health, yay, I'm there with you. But if you don't and you're just wanting to do it, you're on your own, I'm there for that too. Okay. So Christine, I hope that helped. All right. So I am going to hop off today and go on about the rest of my morning. And it's a super busy day today. Grandson day. Oh, I meant to talk about ADHD. Maybe I'll toss that in tomorrow. It's interesting to me, you guys, just nothing to do with the protocol, but everything to do with the protocol. As I'm learning about my own ADHD and the fact that there's a lot of ADHD that's linked to childhood trauma. So post-traumatic stress syndrome. First thing, I got to get this out. I learned yesterday that part of the reason I fall asleep better when there's noise, music, voices, something, is because I have abandonment issues. So I was regularly left alone for days on end in diapers. And I have memories of those, and it was not easy. So part of my ADHD is that if I'm watching a movie, if I'm listening to something, I fall asleep, and I've never been able to explain it. Somebody explained it the other day. It does have everything to do with those abandonment issues and the fact that if there's voices there, I don't feel like I'm all alone and I can relax. So it doesn't set me into that panic-driven state that silence gives me, because I spent a lot of time in silence from the time I was a small child, and that carries through. So the other part of it is with ADHD, we have this inability to utilize dopamine or even create dopamine like everyone else. So we get these hyper-focused and addictive behaviors because it gives those things give us that dopamine rush. Sugar in this toxin thing, sugar gives a huge dopamine rush. So people with ADHD are going to have a harder time regulating their sugar intake than anyone else. So guess what? This tea, through the actions of what it does in my brain, allows me to have some of that dopamine without all the sugar. So now I don't have to crave sugar to get that dopamine hit. I have my tea. Okay, another benefit. So I'm getting messages on where to order. I will let you guys all know. You're going to be 70, got a lot of body fat, and you just want to get yourself more healthier and knows about. So Sandra, that's what I talk about every morning. It's time for me to hop off this morning. I'm here at 8:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday. Join me live tomorrow. Ask me questions. I'm 60. I have people who are over 70 doing the system. I was working with a gentleman last night who's 82. We have guys who are 90. We have children as young as 2 years old utilizing the products just as a preventative measure, knowing that our food is imperfect. We'll go over it all tomorrow, and I would love to answer your questions and see what we can help out with. All right, guys, I'm going to hop off, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. I mean, yesterday was rough for me because I was tired. Today has been amazing. I love the input. When you guys give such detailed comments and are really just interacting, that lights up my soul. So thank you from the bottom of my soul, because getting you guys these answers and expanding people's knowledge really is, I mean, that's the lifeblood for me. So I appreciate you feeding into my joy today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay? Have a great day, guys.